Hello, everybody. I'm Jane Carlin, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm a member of the board of the Puget Sound Book Artists, and I'm also the director of the Collins Library at the University of Puget Sound, and I have the great privilege and pleasure of hosting this wonderful exhibit in our library. Before we begin the presentation, I do want to take a moment and recognize Puget Sound Book Artists and Lucia and Dorothy for hosting this Zoom session, as well as the Book Arts Guild of Seattle, the Book Club of Washington, and the Guild of Book Workers for supporting and promoting this program. Last summer, Jody Fenton and I, who has been a great help and co-partner in presenting and planning this exhibition, we hosted a meeting with local book arts organizations, and we brainstormed about how great it would be to work together to jointly promote an event. And today is evidence that working together allows us to connect with so many people across the country and to share the beauty of these wonderful books. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to join the College Book Arts Association annual meeting, and there were representatives from book arts organizations across the United States. And the one aspect that we all shared together was to say, if there's any silver lining to COVID, it's the fact that under these conditions, we can meet together, create a more accessible book arts community, and share without geographic boundaries. I'd also like to thank Jody and Gabby Cooksey, who helped with the installation of this exhibit just this Friday. I can't wait to see many of you at the Puget Sound Library. Jody is now going to say a few words, and then we'll launch into our speakers. Each artist could have an entire hour devoted to their work, but we hope that this snapshot of the exhibition will entice you to join us at Puget Sound. It's truly wondrous, and I hope many of you will be able to visit. So Jody, take it away.
Thanks, Jane. I have to thank Jane and acknowledge all the effort that she has done. Her library staff has helped us a great deal in this. And of course, the members of the Puget Sound Book Arts have been extraordinary partners in all of this. The Northwest chapter of the Guild of Book Workers is pleased to have the exhibit here in the Northwest. And we're even more pleased that we can showcase the work of our members who are in this exhibit. We're thrilled to be able to do that. It's long been a goal of ours to bring book arts more into the community so more people understand, see and understand this extraordinarily complex and multifaceted art. So we are very fortunate to grab some time from Jeanne Goodman, who is the curator of this exhibit and has been shepherding not only all the entries to the exhibit and the jurying of it, but also packing and unpacking and getting this wonderful exhibit to all these venues all across the country. It's an amazing job, and she's just done a wonderful job at it. So we're really, really happy that she can come and talk to us a little bit about the background of the exhibit. And then from there, we'll start in with the artist presentations. So Jeanne, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Jody.
You're welcome.
Yeah, if we go just to the first slide, and I'll sort of cover, I'll just say slide to advance it.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. And thanks for inviting me here. I'm so happy to be here. It's my first time virtually in Tacoma, and being a part of the Northwest chapter, as well as the Puget Sound Book Art. So thank you so much for inviting me. It's cool that so many people are here today. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump in. So we can go and hear the artists talk about their books, which I think is why everybody else is really here. So I was invited I had 2 prompts to speak a little bit about wildlife exhibition, to give you a little intro. Hopefully each of you have been able to see it if it's been near you or visited a website. We have the wildlife website for ourselves. And also at the host venues, they tend to also put pictures at each one of the venues, which I can share a little bit in the presentation too. And my 2 prompts were how the theme was developed and the time span for the exhibit. If you just go to the next slide, Jody. And so we have the wildlife has its own page, an exhibition page. It's located on the Guild of Bookworkers website. This year, I was really happy to say that we were able to also put photos of the submissions. So all the submissions for wildlife were able to be shown on an online exhibition. So we have the exhibitors page, but also for the first time, all the works that were submitted, unless someone requested that it not be put on the website. So you should check that out. Slide. Oh, thank you, Jen. And if you look in the chat, Jen has put the link to the website in the chat. And so the next couple of slides are where we've been so far. So this is a nationally traveling exhibition, the Guild of Bookworkers Triennial. The timeline is over a period of 3 years for planning, and the exhibition itself is travels for about a year, but spans 2 calendar years. And so a little bit about the first year in planning is you choose the theme and shepherd the end of the last exhibit coming home. And I can't really tell you about choosing the theme because I haven't done it. I actually came in on the 3rd year of this cycle, taking over for Lizzie Curran, who had to step away from the commitment. And also because of COVID, we had to do a lot of reshifting. So it's kind of been a big learning experience this 3rd year. But I've loved working with this theme. I thought we got wonderful pieces submitted around this topic. And I think that it really adapted. Even with the happenings in the world, artists responded with the theme and with what was going on. So I still think it came out wonderfully. But the first year is theme choosing and then shepherding. The second, this photo you will see at the American Bookbinder Museum in San Francisco is where we opened. San Francisco just opened in time for the exhibit to be able, so people could get into the museum to install the exhibit to open, which was amazing. But it was kind of not sure at the time if it was even going to be, if the city would be open. Can we go to the second slide? Next slide. The second year, this is the year where we start securing venue spots, soliciting donors, as well as preparing the announcement and doing the call for entries for artists and members. And our second venue spot was the Robertson Williams Museum of Papermaking at RCW in Atlanta, Georgia. And when looking for venues, we want to choose places that kind of, we have members all over and we want to go coast to coast and lots of spots in the middle. And so Atlanta, Georgia, we've exhibited there a number of times. And it's a wonderful venue, as well as the Papermaking Museum and all of our venues that we're getting to visit. But each venue has the opportunity to sort of take the exhibit and present it on their way. And so at this particular venue, the curator, actually having the photos ahead of time, was able to paint gallery walls to be complementary to a lot of the color themes that she saw from the photos, which we thought that was really going the extra mile. And she, Jarissa, she also presented at our first online standards this past year. Can we go to the third slide? And then finally, the third year is when books are sent in, the artists have completed their work. Hopefully they have submitted it. We have jurying, photography, the catalog, packing, and shipping. It's quite a bit to fit into that third year. The photo that you're seeing here is our third venue. It just came from North Bennett Street School in Boston. It was there for our shortest amount of time, but we always love being able to show at the North Bennett Street School. It's near our New England chapter, which we have quite a few members up there. And I think it's pretty wonderful that students at North Bennett can interact with the work of members. And, you know, we have representation of like 100 years of experience with the combined experience of all our members represented in this show. And so I think that's pretty wonderful for them to be able to see that firsthand and maybe have an opportunity to like help install the exhibit. And so, so in our final slide, Jody, we are at our fourth stop, which is here in Tacoma, there. I'm reporting to you from College Station, Texas. I wish I could see it in Tacoma, but I think it's wonderful that we have colleagues in so many different places, and we have representation in so many different cities, and people can see the show. It's a great opportunity for artists to exhibit their work. When you submit your work to this exhibition, it goes coast to coast and many places in between. And so I just want to thank everyone for submitting their work. It's quite a bit to work towards putting something together, that deadline. I know it well. I have missed many a deadline actually myself. And this was a particularly hard year, but I hope people found moments in the making, you know, to help with the year. So thank you so much for inviting me, and go check out Wildlife's website. And we also have catalogs for sale if you want to buy one for a friend or family member.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm not mute, am I?
Oh yes, I can hear you, Jody.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. So now we'll move on to the artists, and our first artist is Mary Eckstein Gower. And Mary, if you unmute yourself, I hope I'm pronouncing your first name correctly.
Actually, it's Mari.
Mari. Okay, thank you. Thank you. My apologies. And just let me know when you want to advance the slide. You can introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you and whatever else you have planned to share with us today.
Okay, I was just planning to talk about the book and what my inspiration was, and a lot of the backstory about it. Could you show the slide of the book? Ah, great. I had been, before this, I had been working on a series of books about forests, and I was really interested in what our different attitudes historically have been about what a forest is, and how the difference between what we have as an icon of a forest versus what the reality of a forest is. And then in late 2019, I was really disturbed by all of the different forest fires that I was seeing, the ones that were being set on purpose in Brazil, the ones that were happening in Australia and California and just all across the globe, and looking at what the destruction of this amazing resource in our on our planet, and not only the animals that were living in it, but also the biodiversity as well as what it does to feed our atmosphere. And I was inspired by the medieval unicorn tapestries. That if you've been to the cloisters in New York, you see these wonderful images that they have where they've really idealized this whole idea of this fantasy forest with the hunters being able to go through this. It's this wonderland of things for them, not only to hunt, but to see. The idea of the unicorn as this icon of that medieval mentality of, and I thought about the idea about tapestries and forests, and how if you have a tapestry and you pull a string, the whole being becomes more fragile, that the things that are holding it together start to unravel. And so on the backside, I worked with images that are sort of falling apart of the forest, just disintegrating as it's being burnt down, as it's being cut down, all of the things that we haven't been paying attention to. Can we see the next slide? I think there's one more at least. Okay. And I was working with the idea of the structure. I was really interested in what kind of different kinetics I could get that would be attached to that image. So the whole, not only having it be a straight accordion structure, but something that can be put into the star structure. And that, I think you can see a little bit in this, how it's got another dimension that it's folding out, that I'm having the structure also reinforce the idea of things are coming apart. And as the accordion progresses, I worked with what I do in most of my works. A lot of my works are very color conscious. I am doing color studies and what color says, and the different relationships. So it gets progressively more and more into the reds and oranges as it's like the forest is getting on fire. And as it goes along, things start to disintegrate, that you see the animals that are in it start to disappear. And I'm doing that with those outline shapes, that the things become less solid because it's like a tapestry that's unweaving. So I don't think there's any other slides. Is that the end of it?
Let me just check. Yep.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
thank you, Mari. That's very, very interesting. Our next speaker is Karen Hanmer. And Karen, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah.
Whatever you've planned is fine. And I just want to remind everybody, we have, about 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes per person. So I want you to just be conscious of that. But Karen, it's all yours.
Yeah, I think I'm about 2. Hi, everybody. It's really nice to see you. It's really nice to see you, Gabrielle. I hope you're not embarrassed. I've seen you since this started. Hi. And everybody, thanks for spending part of your afternoon with the Guild of Bookworkers. So I'm Karen Hanmer. I've been a member of the Guild for a little over 20 years, including 4 as exhibits chair. Next slide, please. Early in the pandemic lockdown, I began making my own fish parchment to participate in an online exhibit organized by Peter Verheyen, featuring bindings and objects made with fish skin processed by the artists. Next slide, please. Because fish skins are so much smaller than the mammals binders are used to working with, I also searched for small fish-themed antiquarian books to bind. This is an 1834 book by the British scientist Sir Humphrey Davy. At roughly 6 by 4 inches, it's still too large to be bound in a single piece of skin. The boards are covered in pieces of a 3-pound Atlantic salmon, the largest I can get from any grocery store near me. And the spine is goat skin. Next, please. The process is easy, and I know you're wondering, it's mostly odorless. The skin is scraped both sides to remove both the flesh and the scales. It's degreased by washing in dishwashing detergent, then pinned out to dry. I let it air out for a few months just in case, but neither of my cats have ever taken any interest in the dried fish parchment. And sometimes you can see here in the 2 slides on the right, what I call casually gild the high spots left on the skin that held the scales using a tacking iron and bits of real gold foil left over from stamping labels in the quick print. And next, please. This binding is almost 7 inches tall. And again, I needed to piece together to cover it. So from left to right, it's Atlantic salmon, striped bass, lake trout, and mahi-mahi. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Karen. That is so interesting. They're just beautiful, just beautiful. Our next speaker is Suzanne Moore. She'll be talking about her book, Wild Nights. Suzanne, have you unmuted yourself?
Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming. I am a painter, printmaker, lettering artist, and the piece that you see in the show, Wild Nights, is part of a series that I've done about the Emily Dickinson poem, Wild Nights. And we think of Emily as, you know, maybe in blue ribbons and a white dress, very demure, but she was part of an incredibly dynamic community of people in and around Amherst. And this poem, Wild Nights, is all about passion. Next. This was a piece, I rarely do accordion books. I think maybe the last accordion book I did was, you know, 25, 30 years ago. But of course, it makes for a versatile structure when people are designing exhibitions in a variety of places for obvious reasons. So I worked on paper about 13 inches high and layered lettering and painting. So this is on a washed, gesso washed piece of Arches Textuo. There's a writing with sumi ink that's mixed with gouache. Next. And here you can see kind of the idea of creating depth on the page and the hopefully the wildness of the nights, and a little bit of feeling of deep twilight blue in the background, and a whole variety of marks with the brush primarily to not obliterate the word wild, but to give it some complexity. Next. A close-up of some of the gesso and the staining of gouache that is resisted by the gesso on the paper or caught by the areas of naked paper. And this was one of 4 different sets of paintings that I did as potential for the final piece. So it takes the pressure off of just working on one set of pages. And this was the lightest palette. And next. Lettering was added to a panel that was set aside for that purpose, with floating a piece of Japanese paper on which I could write quite finely the poem, and then the large nights that you see, just part of the word is, so wild was horizontal, nights was vertical, and it's done with a folded metal pen and gouache and white acrylic ink. Next. So the book is about, I couldn't even get the entire book in my camera lens. My ceiling isn't quite high enough for that. So this is just part of the unfolded pages. So there's a wild black and white on the left, a wild on the right, and then the painted panel that you've just seen close to the center. And I believe it stretches out flat to about 11 feet. And I believe that's all.
Suzanne, that's just beautiful. I just love seeing the folded pen. The work you do with that is just, I mean, it's magical. It's just magical.
It's a great tool. You can use it quite nicely as a drawing tool as well.
It's beautiful, beautiful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Here we go with Beth Redmond.
Hi. I'm a fine binder. I took workshops at the San Francisco Center for the Book, and in 2019, in the spring, I started the program at the American Bookbinding Academy in Telluride. And during the pandemic, I studied with Colleen Curry. Cold, wet, isolated, hazardous. The roustabouts, roughnecks, and drillers working on offshore rigs in the North Sea live a life both banal and wild. I was inspired by the compelling descriptions of the ordinary and wanted to create a binding that was both true to both the rough and tumble existence of the subjects and the incongruous poignancy of the poetry. Next. Steel Horizons is a collection of poems about the lives of men working in the offshore oil rigs in the North Sea. It's letterpress printed and illustrated with linoleum cuts. I found the book to be very compelling, partly for the incongruous nature of poetry and roughnecks, but more importantly for the visual and emotional nature of the text. Each poem paints a picture, a vignette of someone's life, a landscape of steel and ocean, buffeted by weather and loneliness. Thinking about the design for the cover of this book, I was reminded of the photographs of Hiroshi Sugimoto, a Japanese photographer who made large-scale black and white photographs of the sea and sky with the horizon as the only feature. That was where I started my design, a horizon line and a mostly monochromatic palette. I imagined a version of what you could see standing on an offshore platform. The front cover became the foreground and the back cover the distant view. As I executed the design, some things were relatively straightforward while others were more complicated. I cut out an awfully lot of tiny little offshore oil rigs before I got it right. I continued the industrial feel with an onlay for the title, like a sign nailed to the wall. My two aha moments on this binding came first when I painted the tiny little orange flame on the oil platform in the back, and then when I realized I could use actual metal cable on the front. Next. I finished the binding by carrying the horizon line and the changing weather across the blue edge-to-edge doublures and a painted gray fly leaves. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. It's just a lovely book. It's really lovely. Next is Todd Pattison.
Thank you. I appreciate being asked to speak today. I am the conservator at the the New England Historic Genealogical Society. And my book is a binding on Keith Smith's book, Mentors and Memories, book number 324. Mr. Smith numbers all of his books in order. And this book is about the people, the teachers, the friends, the patrons and collectors of his work that have shaped his life. And so I wanted to show how all that information that he got from other people have really created his life. But he's had to organize that. So if we go to the next slide, on the cover, I wanted something that showed how all these random pieces of information that he received from people are organized. And so you have the same embossed or impressed design on the front and back cover. There's kind of information on the spine in the different colors that you see that are sprinkled on a native dyed piece of goat. And then there are little dots of color within the design on each board. We'll see a close-up of that later. Next slide. And these are just 2 pages from the book, just to give you an idea of what the book looks like. There's a lot of text, but there's also illustrations. On the left is a piece of artwork that Keith was given by the American but Swiss-born photographer Robert Frank. And Frank was very instrumental in helping Keith Smith get a Guggenheim. And so that was a piece of artwork that he was given to wish him good luck for that. And on the right is a letter to Keith Smith from Riva and David Logan, art collectors and supporters of Keith, just talking about, wanting to get more of his work. Next slide. Keith uses a lot of color in his work, and I'm envisioning the information that he gets from these mentors and friends and teachers as little bits of color. So I wanted to show color on the text edge. It's almost as if it's coming out of the book. Next slide is a detail of the cover where you can see the little tiny tool dots of color that are in that design, and it's kind of organized. And the next slide. What I like most about the binding are the end papers. So Keith shared this photograph of himself, the altered photograph on the left, and I took that image and I cut it into 1/4-inch wide strips, and I alternated every strip of the image with a collage of little tiny bits of decorative paper. And so I end up with 2, not exactly the same because they're alternate strips from the original image, but 2 pieces of paper that you see on the right-hand side. And then if we go to the next slide, I can show you where those are then cut down and used as the end papers on the book. So I'm again trying to show this idea of color information that he's taking in and then using to create his life, or at least part of his life. And it's almost running through his image, almost as you might see computer code running through something. So just that he has to organize all that information in his computer, his brain. So that's my book. Thank you very much.
God, that's just fascinating. The end sheets are just fascinating. So glad that you explained how you did it. Our next speaker is Laura Russell.
Hi, everybody. I'm really thrilled to be here today. I miss you all from the Pacific Northwest.
Yes.
Am I muted still? Or can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Sorry, I was getting a weird message on my computer. I miss you all. It's really kind of, I'm coming to you from Tucson, about 3 miles down the road from Don and Suzanne. So it's really thrilling to be here. I don't know if all of you know this, but in 2019, I came to Tucson to attend the College Book Arts Association conference here in Tucson and didn't leave. Kind of fell in love with the desert. We came down to cycle here, and it's been just a glorious place to be ever since. We started out as snowbirds for the first 2 winters, and now we're full timers. So it's kind of exciting. My book is called Sentinels of the Desert. And in the 20 years plus that I've been a member of the Guild, it's the first book I ever got accepted into one of their exhibitions. So that was kind of exciting. My books are probably just too digital for the Guild. So I was extra thrilled to be here this year. Sentinels of the Desert is a Haiti Kyle structure called the Pivoting Panorama. And a lot of people ask what came first, the photographs or the structure. In this particular case, and it's different in every book, in this case, the structure came first. And I went looking for a project to use for this structure. So this turned out to be the perfect piece for that. Next slide, please. The front of the book is a timeline of the life of the saguaro cactus. When I got here to Tucson, I was completely enamored with these saguaro cactuses they can grow to 150 feet tall and live 150 years. I'm sorry, I had that wrong, 60 feet tall, 3 stories tall. I got that wrong. But anyway, they can live to 153 years. Next slide, please. The backside of the book is a poem about the cactuses, and I'll read you a short excerpt, very short. It says, saguaro cactus, majestic symbol, iconic wonder of the Wild West, sentient beings, so human-like, individual, mortal, somatic, fleshly. To the Tohono O'odham people, legend and lifeline. A boy in the sand becomes a saguaro, sweet fruit becomes wine, marking a new calendar, calling for thunderous monsoons. Keystone species, essential as water, foundation of the Sonoran Desert, census counted like humans every decade. Citizen scientists scouting young pricks to elder statesmen. But perhaps most devastating, invasive weeds and grasses tip the ecological balance, bringing risk of desert wildfires. I look around, imagining all these strange and wonderful desert plants replaced by grassland, and shudder. I close my eyes and see saguaros exploding into flames. And that's what inspired this poem, this work. Is in 2020, there was the Bighorn Fire, which burned about 2,000 of these saguaro cactuses and came very close to Tucson. It was a very scary fire. So that's all I have. Thank you for having me today.
Laura, we miss you as well, and wish
Oh,
love
thank
this book. It's so sweet and very, very timely.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Next is Bonnie Thompson Norman. Bonnie, are you
I'm here. I can let's see.
there you are.
I don't know. I can't see me. Let's see. Okay, you can, so I'm in focus. All right. Good morning. It's nice to be here. Thank you everybody for organizing this exhibit. I'm always really proud to be part of a traveling exhibit for the Guild of Bookworkers. And let's see, I should say something about myself. I'm a letterpress printer and a book artist. And I'm in my studio right now working on something. So the theme wildlife was a timely theme because I was asked by my dear friend Elizabeth Butler, who's on the board of the Kubota Foundation, to letterpress print a poem by Shankar Narayan. And it was a project that the foundation was creating in honor of the 50th anniversary of these beautiful gardens in Seattle, which is now part of the city of Seattle, but which was founded 50 years ago or begun 50 years ago by Mr. Kubota. And a beautiful book was produced, and 6 poets were invited to write about the garden, and designers and printers were asked to print those poems. So very gratefully, I was one of those poets or one of those designers. And so next slide, please. So Shankar's poem was about the immigrant experience that Mr. Kubota went through, as well as identification that the poet had with the designer of the garden, and about their immigrant experiences. And he was talking about how you can't erase your roots no matter where you are. And so I was very touched by that. And I carved a linoleum block and hand set the type and printed this. It actually went through, it's in, so that the roots are hand inked, and there are 2 ink colors on the broadside printing, but it went through the press many times, because sometimes it's easier to do it on 2 different presses. So it's a beautiful poem, and I hope that it describes very well the genesis of the garden, as well as the identification that immigrants have when they think about how this garden was created and the roots that they set down in a new place. And next slide, please. So what's interesting is that part of the requirement for a traveling exhibition is that you're asked to create an enclosure, a permanent enclosure for your piece, so that it can travel safely. And this is not the first time that, very gratefully, not the first time my work has been included in an exhibit. And it's not the first time that the enclosure itself seems to get included in the catalog. I'm kind of tickled by that, because it's really only meant to be something to travel with and not something to exhibit. But I'm just showing you this because it ended up in the catalog anyway. So it kind of tickles me. And thank you very much. I'm so delighted to see you all.
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you. That's a really powerful metaphor. The fact that people have roots, and they're there, and they're always there, and they actually are, they're really important to us, and we need to pay more attention. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Our next artist is Carolina Veenstra.
Hello, I'm not there yet. I don't see myself, but can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I don't see my picture on there, but that's okay. You don't need to see me. I can just talk.
It's coming. I think they'll get it up there shortly.
Okay. All right. You can go to the next slide. Oh, I guess I could just say about myself that I'm a conservator, bookbinder, book artist. And you can go to the next slide. This is the inspiration for my book. This photograph was taken last week at the park, or a couple weeks ago at the park where I walk many days. And the park is on the ancestral home of the Coast Salish people, in particular Suquamish and Sklallam. The remains of that large tree, it's the cedar tree in the middle of the photograph, is one of hundreds in this park, and is surrounded by second growth forest that's growing up all around them. And I've always thought that they were just so very beautiful that 8 years ago, when I was helping with a wetland survey, I started to photograph them. And the image you'll see in the next photograph, not the next one, but in 2 photographs, comes from this particular tree. So the other thing I would just say about this is that these beautiful old remnants really speak to me of a multi-layered aging and of my own aging. So you go to the next slide. You have the front cover of the book here with the box behind it. When I saw the prompt wildlife for this exhibit, I was immediately drawn to the title and thought about these elders in my local wild. And I knew I wanted to make a book about them that combined watercolors and text. But I really had no idea how to go about it because there were so many different elements. So I think the first element that I chose was the structure. I decided I wanted to do a non-adhesive structure, and that I wanted to use this paper. This is Cave Paper's persimmon paper, which reminded me of the inner bark of the cedar trees You can go to the next slide. The lower photograph, you can see that it's a long stitch binding, and I spaced the different enterings, the different holes unevenly. Although, as anybody who's done a long stitch binding knows, they have to be planned very exactly. And so this was, I think I did 6 models before I arrived at this one. And then in the top photograph, you see the spread. Now there's 6 of these in the book. And I began painting for the photographs in the fall of 2020. I didn't have a lot of book conservation work, so I had a lot of free time on my hand. And I decided that I wanted to get better at watercolor painting. And so I started painting these trees and from photographs that I'd taken of them. At the same time, I was looking for some text to go with them, and I couldn't find any, so I decided I had to write my own. So again, I wasn't sure where to start, so I started out taking a writing class online with the poet Claudia Castro Luna, who was very encouraging. The title of the book that's in the lower photograph, Out of Doors, came to me one day when I came back from a walk, and I was looking up the etymology of the word forest, which some of those sources say that it means outside, as in outside the gate or outside cultivation. And so I played with this idea and came to the title Out of Doors, which is where I want to be most of the time. And then I played around some more with the dictionary and decided that I would use F words for the titles of the poems. And in the back of my mind was the beautiful italic F that I knew I would use at some point. So in the weeks that followed, I was working and playing back and forth between writing and painting. I came up with 6 words: forest, form, flow, forget, foresee, and forgive. And the spread that you have in front of you here is forgive. And it's very short. I'll read the poem to you. Pale blue green murals, lichens renew. Forgive tired wounds. New layers enrich cortex residues, transforming life. We'll go to the last slide. Next slide. Jody?
Yeah, I did.
No, it's not there. Oh, there it is. Okay, there's a gap. There must be a lag. Okay, sorry.
No problem.
On the left is the photograph that I painted the Forgive watercolor from. And on the right is the first old tree that really called to me in the woods. Now, although the tall bodies of these trees have been gone for hundreds of years or more, their layered remains are still feeding the next generation of trees that's growing around them. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Carolina. That's really interesting. So I think now I can turn it back over to Jane. I'm going to stop my screen share. And I think Jane has been looking at the chat and can maybe pick up from there. Jane, you're muted.
After 2 years, why don't I remember to unmute? I would like to say that when I hear the stories related to the books, it just is so meaningful, and I can't wait to get back into the library tomorrow and look at each one of them with a new lens. So thank you all for sharing your stories. Lots of positive feedback in the chat, but maybe I can start with a question. Laura, can you tell us a little bit more about the Heidi Kyle structure of your book?
Sure. The first time I ran across this structure was at the Heidi Hello Haiti exhibit at 23 Sandy. And at the time, Haiti called it was a book by Julie Chen that was in the show. And Haiti called it at the time, the pivoting panorama structure. And when her book came out, it was shortened to just the panorama structure. So if you look at her book, it's in there as the panorama structure. It's a really fantastic structure. I kept looking at the book in photos, trying to figure out the geometry of the pages. And she does such a great job of instructions in the book that she wrote, that her and her daughter wrote, that it's very easy to figure out the geometry after all by reading the book. So it's really a fantastic structure that allows these moving panels to display a piece of art in some way. And it really was just perfect for this book.
Great. Love the name of that structure. Karen, I think you answered already in the chat, but there was a question about the content of your book, and you shared with us in your commentary that you spent some time looking for older editions of books on angling. Maybe talk a little bit more about that process.
Sure. Nothing that anyone else on the call hasn't done, just spending time on ABE when they should be doing something else. So I looked for something small, preferably 4 inches or less. I found out that the terminology like 16 mo and 32 mo and so forth, it could really kind of be anything. So I was surprised sometimes when they came. And I looked for books I could afford, but also books from before 1820-ish. I picked some arbitrary cutoff point before which paper was probably good and after which paper might be awful.
Sounds good. Bonnie, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you feel like you could share a few stanzas of the poem that is printed?
I would love to.
Fabulous, thank you.
Let's see. This is the poem is titled Kubota by Shankar Narayan. It isn't that long, so I'll read the whole thing if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Yours is the choice of futures. Survey ravage, see green. Survey alien, see home. It doesn't matter if you live to see it. It doesn't matter if it never blooms. Just plant the seed. Mix what you knew with what you are knowing. Mix what you were with what you are becoming. It doesn't matter if they get your tongue. It doesn't matter if they kidnap you, fence you in. What's more distance when you already came so far? There too you will survey. There too you will plant. Minidoka, Guantanamo, no match for a seedling. This is your becoming. You don't know how long it will last, but what you have cannot be extinguished. It goes where you go and it angers them. They do everything to kill your language, but you know the trees will speak for you, signing welcome. So you mix seeds, and someday someone will walk your oasis more eloquent than any Ellis Island, under your grand fir more graceful than any cold cast statue, holding aloft its tuft like a beacon, and they will mouth the names you so carefully entangled. Peony, Threadleaf, Kuretake, Tanyosho, Empress, Atlas, Weeping, and feel kin because they too bear far off trees in their blood. And I too know red dust, bring my gulmohars, neems, and peepals. It doesn't matter that you never met me. This is my home you saw, your future my becoming. They never could stop your roots. I'm so moved by this poem every time. It's written for someone who came to this country in the early 1900s. He bought about 20 acres in South Seattle where no one lived and started working as on his garden. He was interned in a concentration camp during the war, and there he created a garden. He came home, he renewed his efforts, and now it's a heritage garden in the city of Seattle.
That's so wonderful, Bonnie, and so meaningful for those of us here in the Pacific Northwest, particularly Bainbridge Island. And I shared with Bonnie in the chat that we had several students at the University of Puget Sound that were interned, and we do quite a bit of work with our current students to share their stories. And I mentioned that this broadside was on display, so there's a student group coming over to see it this week.
Oh, that's
So
wonderful.
good for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for people who are coming and going through SeaTac, that garden is not that far from SeaTac. It's a, you know, a little bit of a path to get there, but it is really an amazing garden.
It's well worth the trip. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. You can explore it in a little bit of time or for hours or for the whole day. It's very beautiful.
Thanks for sharing that, Suzanne. Another question to Karen. Everyone is fascinated with the second book as well. How did you piece those different skins together?
With N-band silk. I used linen thread and it didn't look right. And I'm doing it another way now. I'm using tackets, which are like a medieval form of staples. Can you see that?
Fascinating.
Yeah. And that's the name of our new cat also, Tacket.
And it's so great with Zoom to be able to peer into your studios. I have to say,
yeah.
That's really great. Suzanne, Wild Nights, you've done books on Emily Dickinson. You mentioned a little bit about what fascinates you about Emily, but about this particular poem, would you share a little bit of the poem with us, or just talk a little bit more about your inspiration with Emily?
Oh, I don't have it right in front of me, but it's yeah, it's in the book, and it's really kind of a quite intimate portrait of her passion of longing to spend a wild night, you know, with a lover. The interesting thing about Emily is that I knew superficially of her work, but I got a commission from a collector in Chicago to do a book of 10 poems. And I decided, instead of doing something, you know, small and pale palette, to read as many of the 1,653 poems that she wrote, which is quite a feat. So, but I read a lot of them, and I was surprised at the range. And right before I got the commission to do Emily Dickinson, Don and I were working on the Bob Dylan book that we got commissioned to do together. And the most interesting thing occurred to me is that, in a way, Emily Dickinson was a troubadour of her time as much as Dylan was. So she was about 100 years earlier, and she dealt with intimacy, friendship, war, the ravages of war, with transcendental ideas, questions of eternity and infinity. So many of the same things that Dylan dealt with. But her line lengths were much shorter and her poems were much shorter. So that was a tremendous revelation, and it started a continued reading of her collected works. And I've done, I think, 4 versions of Wild Nights so far.
That's great. And Karen, thanks for putting that link in the chat. We'll have to have a look at that. We have a few minutes. If you would like to unmute and ask a question or just comment in general to our speakers. As I said in the beginning of the introduction, every single book deserves an entire presentation to itself. You're all so inspiring and just wonderful work.
Can I speak?
Of course.
I'm in the Book Arts Guild. I'm the treasurer, Margaret Sandelin. I was actually at Collins Library this last week because I couldn't remember when the show started. So I walked in and I thought, oh, it's not here, but the catalogs were there. And I was early to see my niece. So I sat down with the catalog and looked through it very carefully, which just really whetted my appetite to come back and see the show. And hearing the speakers, as you said, talking about has just even made me more anxious to. I wish you'd had everybody talk. It would have been wonderful, but not really practical. But thank you so much for doing this chat.
Well, thank you. And perhaps there's plenty of time. Maybe we can arrange another chat with some of the other artists. And good point to mention about the catalog. We have about 6 or 7 of the catalogs in the exhibit space. So when you come, not only are the books fully labeled, but you can have the catalog to walk around with, which is really nice. And I did put in the chat that our library is open 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, but we'll also be open Sundays starting March 29th through April. So for those of you that find it less difficult to get from Seattle or the South Sound on a Sunday, we have those open hours for you. Lucia, how to order the catalog. I believe, Jeannie, are you still on the call? I think the catalog can be ordered from the Guild.
The Guild of Bookworkers website. Go check out the events and you can order it in the shop. We have a limited supply.
Ah, okay.
What does the catalog look like? Looks pretty nice, Sam. It's similar in format to the Guild newsletter.
It's in full color though.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, good. Thank you, Karen. You've got everything there. Excellent. So it's a great catalog. Any other parting comments? I can tell you that this is a much nicer way to spend a Sunday afternoon than last Sunday, which was the Super Bowl, right? This is so much more uplifting. But I do want to thank again the Book Club of Washington, the Book Arts Guild, and the Guild of Bookworkers National and the Northwest chapter who kindly supported the financial aspects of hosting this exhibit. And we do hope to have some in-person events as soon as COVID restrictions at the university are lifted. So again, I want to thank each and every one of you. You're so inspiring, and it was a great presentation. Jody, any parting remarks?
It's hard to follow such a beautiful program, except to just say thank you again. All the work that goes into it and all the careful thinking and all the emotions that you all put into the work, I think it shows, and it's beautiful and it's inspiring. So thank you so much.
Yeah, that's great, Jody. I do want to say too that the Guild has a great model for putting together an exhibition, for the documentation, all the information that we've been provided. It's just been so helpful, and I've learned so much about that process, as well as having the beautiful books in the library. So thank you all for joining us. And thank you, Jody. It's been great working with you. Jeannie, thank you.
Love it, love it, love it.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks to everybody who helped put this together.
Yes.
Great job.
Our
Yeah.
pleasure.
It was wonderful to see everyone. It's always nice to see everybody.
Yay.
Jane, thank you for hosting the exhibit.